Yeah, let's talk about one of the topics I think that occurs to both of us, having been women in corporate America, is you get a lot of advice
Hmm.
that is really geared towards men and in particular white men. And it's great for them. It's wonderful advice, fantastic. They can use it. But as
Yeah,
women, this advice is effectively useless.
yeah.
Things like express your opinion more clearly. Yeah, no, 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 that's not what anybody wants. They want you to
Mhm.
be diplomatic and they want you to be cautious at the
Yeah,
same time being, quote, assertive without being aggressive. So there's
right.
a lot of pieces of advice that are out there. I mean, one of my favorites from entrepreneurship, I don't know if you came up against this, but I called an old friend of mine who um, he had left a fairly senior position at an aerospace company. And when I
Hmm.
shared with him what I was thinking about doing, he was like, "Oh, you don't need a website. Like, don't waste your time doing all of that stuff to get started. Just go. Just
Hmm.
go." And I was like, "Friend, the absolute first thing someone is going to do is go look at my website to make sure I'm legit because they're
Yeah,
not just going to take my word for it." So I
right. That you're a
love that.
real person. Yeah.
Yeah, like I love that you can stand something up just based on your own connections. But
Hmm.
every one of my connections wants to see my website. They want an immediate reference. They want a connection to something else. They want to see my offerings. Like I don't get to show up and be like, here's my word, take my word for it. Like,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? And so to me, that
Yeah.
was really a jarring moment when this piece of advice from him was very much like, oh, just go for it. Worry about the website later. I was like, I don't think this is a me perception problem.
Yeah, and what's interesting is this was way back when I was in graduate school, and I remember one of the assignments was to read certain chapters of this book, and I forgot what this book is called, but it was an older book, like maybe published in the 90s. And the thing that I remember distinctly from one of the chapters was when they talked about the power of mentorship. The book was
Mm.
revolved around workplace diversity. That I know. So I just don't remember the title of the author. But the thing about mentorship in the workplace is that it didn't matter what race uh, the mentee was or what ethnicity they were. They just saw that there was an overwhelming positive impact as long as the mentor was a white male. And this was like an older, kind of research, kind of in the 90s or late 90s. And so fast forward to several years when I'm in the corporate space, I'm like, there's no way this is still possibly true, right? But then lo and behold, you see articles from different publications that are still saying the ones who get you through the doors are not just mentors, but quote unquote so-called sponsors, right? They're the ones who actually open the door for you rather than just give you advice that regardless of whether it's a mentor or a sponsor, but if you have a white man in your corner, you will move through the ranks. Um, and I don't know what the stats on it is today and how that shows up, but one of the things that, creates that disparity, I think, early on in men's and women's careers, because that disparity happens actually early on, is that men tend to have more access to more powerful men.
Mhm.
And a lot of that, and I like to think that there's not something sinister, right? Like everyone's going around going, oh my gosh, I'm only going to, let's all get together and only mentor the males. I don't think there's something sinister, but it just shows that we human tend to connect with people who remind us of us.
Mhm.
And if you have a certain group that's already in power and they tend to bring up and help people rise who look like them, well, they're just perpetuating, a certain pattern. So that's that's the thing that I think we still see in the entrepreneurial world,
Mhm.
where women-founded companies are not getting the funding, even though statistically, once they do, they actually perform over twice as well as their male counterparts. So
Yeah, it's like why aren't you choosing the clearly like statistically better investment? But yeah, to your point, I mean, it's really to me it's really fascinating to look at those numbers and to think about that because I recognize there are always going to be tensions between men and women in the workplace. And sometimes those it's just a fraught experience sometimes because of
yeah.
things like reputation and assumptions. Like, I think there's still some caution because of all of the HR scandals that have happened. And that to me is really a
Yeah.
huge, huge problem because it's the women again carrying the load for men's bad behavior. And that to
Yeah.
me is a bummer. And that's not to say that every woman is perfect and doesn't misbehave, but I mean, by and large, it's like, here we go again with the same old tropes.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely heard that, post Me Too era where men said, yeah, they just won't mentor women anymore because they do not want to risk any accusation or potential for accusations. Like, well, kind of a short-sighted reactivity, but I
Yeah.
also understand that if you're in an environment where you feel like that's just going to happen to you, which, in some ways it's like, I don't know that it was that widespread that people were just getting accused out of nowhere without reason. Certainly there were cases where some people maybe did take advantage of a situation to surface a complaint that really was just a complaint.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's this whole thing with the advice that men give. It's funny because it's like, yeah, they can carry you far, but then they also may offer wisdom that don't necessarily apply to you. So
Yeah.
we were talking about this earlier that I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and, in particular, a lot of podcasts that are profiling, public figures who are founders of really big companies. You think of like the Jeff Bezos of the world, the Michael Dells, and like the Dyson guy, all these great innovators and founders of companies of, products that we use daily or business products. And I was trying to look through the list of thinking, I was trying to see like what's the pattern here. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's not a single woman, you know, um, and we often don't hear a lot of women. And what's disappointing is that when there are certain women whose voices are heard in the business world, um, I don't know, some of them will say things and I'm like, that is just so incorrect. Like they try to talk about leadership, but it's so incorrect. And so, and I don't know. I don't know what it is, but maybe we just need more of us. We need to start taking more advice from women. I mean, I'm not saying that the advice from the men are bad. But a lot of times the advice comes in the form of, no, you just gotta put in as many hours as you can into your business. You gotta do this, you gotta push, push, push. And it's like, that's great. It sounds like you're single. It sounds like maybe you don't have kids. Or it sounds like if you are married with kids, you probably have someone taking care of all that stuff in the background for you. So that's great. That's great that you can tell people to work 18 hours a day, but that's just not realistic, especially if women want to grow, if women want to build a business and women are caretakers. That's just not going to happen. So, I mean, that's my gripe with the visibility or the presence of, just a lack of good women business leaders out there. I'm not saying there aren't, but their voices are just so overshadowed by the male voices.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, and the other thing too is like that leads us back into that same, I'm going to call it an inhumane work cycle. And I think the thing that's so tricky about this is like, yeah, okay, you can work a lot, but that doesn't, like, volume doesn't substitute for quality of work. And
Mhm.
when we had butts in seats from, 8 to 6 or 8 to 7 or 7 to 6 or whatever it was, we didn't produce necessarily better, higher quality work. And so we also created this workspace, like we did this to ourselves. And I think we're in a position where people are
Mhm.
saying, this is not a productive and humane workplace, and it's not one that we want. And oh, by the way, the next generation isn't taking that bait. They
Yeah,
aren't
they're
interested.
not.
So you can say this all you want, but you're going to lose workers over it. And so until we start changing the mindset about what is the quality of work and what does that take to do, then we're going to be stuck in this like, let's go back to I'm going to blame the boomers for a second, but the boomer led volume is the way to answer this mail. And that didn't help anybody. Nobody was happier. Let's
No.
get heart attacks and strokes down, shall we? By not working all the time.
I mean, so I just saw this thing recently and it was just triggering. Well, triggering in the sense that I just like kind of rolled my eyes really hard.
Yeah.
So it was from the CEO of Uber who says that he expects people to just work all the time. He says, don't even think about joining Uber if you're not ready to put in the weekends. He said he said if you don't respond to an email on the weekend, then he's like, you're not a good culture fit. And I'm telling you, approaches like that, like I think, I don't know, I think maybe some CEOs feel like they're such a big man when they make statements like that. But what they don't realize, it shows kind of on the flip side of that. They feel like they're coming out and they're like this warrior CEO who's like, you gotta work, we're, glorifying working to the bones. On the flip side of that, I'm thinking, what is it that you're doing that you can't accomplish, in a reasonable amount of time that allows you to also live your life? Like, what are you actually telling people? Are you telling people that for your company, for your salary package, that they need to be putting in the hours like you are? So oftentimes I think it's like also like with founder CEOs who are like, oh, I wish my employees would, have the heart or dedicate to the work like I do. It's like, well, no, it's
Right.
your baby, it's not theirs.
Totally.
And I start to hear that from a lot of business people who are like, they only want to hire employees who can really buy into the mission so hard that they would, I don't know, basically, work two jobs worth of time, at their company. I'm like, if that's what you expect, that's fine. Just so you know, some of the smartest people out there don't buy into that.
No,
And, do you want to hire for someone who just puts in brute force, or do you want to hire the smartest people? And I'm not saying that there aren't sprints at work where there are times when, right, when
absolutely.
like everyone's heads down and we just got to push something really hard. And, I think that's reasonable for most people to know that there's seasons and then there's ebbs and flows and workload.
Yeah.
But to say that you need to come in and be a workhorse because I'm giving you a paycheck, I'm like, I'm sorry, that level of arrogance, that is way too last century. I'm sorry.
And to me, there's two really huge problems with that. One of them is scarcity. So a lot of people are never going to be a CEO, and we're told do all these things, here's all the things you have to do, but there's only a fixed number or a small number of CEO positions and very senior positions that come up. And it's not always because of a failure on our parts to do the work, to deliver great content, to be exceptional at our jobs. It's that we weren't in the right place at the right time with the right sponsor.
Hmm.
So, like, that doesn't work. And not everybody anymore wants to be CEO. Additionally, just because you're the CEO now, like,
Hmm.
you got to take a cold, hard look at the fact that when you're not CEO anymore, your name is forgotten. I mean, there's a lot of names like, who was that guy again? Like, who
Yeah.
came after Jack Welch? I don't remember. Who's the
Yeah.
current CEO of our
And that's a well-known company. You take a smaller, more local company, right? And you're like, oh, who's the CEO? Never heard of them. Who's the CEO before that? Never heard of them. Like you think, yeah, people think that they have this amazing legacy. And the thing is, at the end of at the very end of your life, not even just at the end of the day, I'm thinking about this, like who, like there's some people who do things that are so monumentally impactful to the world, like Steve Jobs with the iPhone and all that system, right? Sure, you get memorialized in so many ways throughout culture, but those people still know you about your work. Like who's honoring you as a person,
Mhm.
right? And eventually people are going to forget him. Eventually, we're going to progress in tech to a point where, I mean, do you remember the guy who like invented the first whatever thingy-majig, 100 years ago? You know, like who, ask who invented, the first Bluetooth device.
And
That was a huge deal. I mean, we can certainly look them up, but like just the fact that you can't even think about that person, like this is basically what your legacy is when you put everything into work. Like eventually it's going to die off. And sure, your lineage may die off too, but I think there's something a little bit more impactful when you are remembered by how you treat others and your relationship with others than purely just for your work. At least
totally.
for me, right? I mean, think about it. Like, who's going to be at your funeral? The people who love you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and this is really interesting because one of the things that you mentioned is like, who invented this thing? Well, now we're finding out like, oh, Hedy Lamarr, this great
Yep.
actress. Oh, it was her work that prepared the world for GPS, but she never got credit.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
oh, interesting. So there's more and more of an appetite to see who actually was involved. And newsflash, it's not the flashy CEO more than likely. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes, but it's a really interesting thing. And I think that's where, to me, some of that advice falls flat is, again, there's a scarcity problem. Not everybody's going to be a CEO. Not everybody's
Hmm.
going to find that spot. And that's fine because not everybody wants it either. And
Hmm.
so, like, you expecting me to want the same things you want is not reasonable. I want the time to go run. I want the time to volunteer. I want the
Yeah.
time to do all these other things. And so telling me that I have to live your life so
Hmm.
that I can be just like you is like, but I don't want to.
Yeah. And, granted, there are trade-offs with everything, right? But I think it goes back to like being able to really clarify what success looks like to you and
Mhm.
what you want out of your endeavors. Because I think oftentimes people think that that in order to be successful, in order to have made it in life, it needs to look a certain way. And that sometimes is in opposition to how they actually want to live their life. And so they'll have this tension because they're trying to do something for something that they think they want, but really what they want is to be able to live their life in their own terms. I think most people really just want that, want to be able to live their life in their own terms. And then, if they happen to have a job that they enjoy, they say that's a bonus. But otherwise, not everyone needs to find fulfillment through their jobs or through their work, right? Or through labor,
Yeah.
and some people do, and that's fine. But I think it's also but it's like to what I was saying, like you got to get clear with what is the life you want to lead and this thing that you say you want, are you fully aware? And you won't be fully aware in the beginning, but like, are you at least somewhat aware of all the steps it takes to get there and what you may need to stop doing to get there, right? And are you okay with that? And if you are okay with that and you say that is aligned to how you want to live your life for now, for a period of time or whatever, or or in perpetuity, then that's great. Then that you found your path. But if you're saying, actually, no, everything that I'm doing right now to get to my goal is not actually aligned to how I want to live my life, well, then maybe you need to change your goal.
Absolutely.
Why was that your goal in the beginning? Was it because you actually wanted it or because you thought that you had to want it because that's what everyone else says is what you want, right? Because else would say you need to have a promotion. That's what you want. You want a career with a promotion with a clear ladder upward, and you need to be taking a step up every few years. And like, so then most people go around managing career thinking that's what I need to be doing. But some people don't really care for that, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that's just kind of like my observation that not everyone really finds fulfillment through labor.
Mm-mm. Well, we've also sort of forced this definition of success, which is the highest title you can get,
Yeah.
instead of saying what is success for you? What does that look like? And I think until you can define that and say what's going to facilitate that success, you're not going to be able to answer that question of why this is important to you.
Hmm.
And I think that that's a
Absolutely.
tricky thing, right? Is it's hard to look in the mirror after we've been told our whole lives you should want to be a CEO or a vice president or pick the title, whatever it is. You should
Yeah.
want the top job in this. But it's like, should I? Should I?
Yeah. And again, I think most people don't take the time to think about what they really want. Like we walk around with stories and patterns, a lot of
Yeah.
it through our upbringing, through socialization, and that's inevitable. I'm not saying that we can completely eliminate that, but you just have to be aware that maybe a lot of what you want is because that's what you've been taught one should want.
Mm-hmm.
And and this is why, we often sometimes see people do things drastic, right? Like there's this woman I went to school with, and I guess she had that kind of, laid out, planned out life that a lot of people have, right? Where, she went to school, got a job, And then she went back to school to kind of to want to elevate in her career. And while this was all happening, she, has a long-term boyfriend who later on became her fiance. And then they got married and they have this, beautiful life of like the average middle class, where, upper middle class, where two people have the great corporate jobs and they're living this, cool city life. And then one day, out of nowhere, all of a sudden start to see changes on social media. She had divorced, given up her corporate career, and just went all the way to the other side of the world to be a hippie on the beach. And so to me, like, just watching it from afar, it's like, huh, that's interesting, that's intriguing. And I think a lot of us wouldn't understand, like, why would you want that, right? Like,
Yeah.
why did she leave literally everything behind? And she's even talked a couple times about how her family doesn't understand why she did it. I think part of that really comes from that. And I don't want to speculate for her, but I think for a lot of people, it's probably this sense that like all your life you've been molded to fit a certain box or certain avatar.
Yeah.
And then one day you just can't contain how you feel and who you feel like you should be anymore. And so the way that comes off is probably pretty extreme.
I bet.
Versus what if or what if someone had never been taught to be a certain way and they just kind of learned and unfolded what they wanted slowly so that they're not making this giant change in their mid 30s, right?
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think there's something beautiful about striving for big things. And I'm somebody who's competitive and there's things that I really want to achieve.
Yeah.
And there have been times when I have also looked at around and said, I don't understand why someone would want this, right? Would want this life. But the thing is, you want what you want, you know? You have to, like, no one can decide that for you. You just have to decide that. I'm of the belief that you can pick whatever life you want, just as long as you know that there are certain trade-offs. Like you can't expect to be completely comfortable living a certain life while also building a really big business. Like you need
Yeah.
to know that there are certain trade-offs, right? If you um or if you want to become CEO or whatever one day, and then but then you're finding that okay, the path there is not taking me where I want in life, then you may need to examine, is the goal still meaningful to you? Or is there something that you're willing to exchange in your current situation to make it happen? So that's just my take on it. I think for people who are listening, my suggestion really is, you sit with yourself and really think about what it is that you want. That is the first step. And don't think about what people will say because that's the first thing. Oh, I want this. Oh, but what people say. No, take that out of the equation for now. What is it that you really want? How do you want your life to look?
Yeah. And I think you touched on it too with the trade-offs, right? Is in corporate America, you will trade time for money.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. And having a front row seat to some folks who have made that decision, you will trade a lot of your time for money. How much
Yeah.
is worth it to you? And so I look at this whole proposition like this as we're modern day mercenaries. That's all we are. We are selling our skills for dollars. And so the
Mhm.
question is, how much of my time and what rate am I willing to sell it?
Yeah.
And get really clear on that because you will give up a lot of things for more
Mhm.
dollars. Okay,
Yeah.
if it's worth it. See if that time
Right.
can be bought.
Yeah. I like that. And it's also liberating because
Yeah,
you don't have to tie your worth to your job or to your career. A lot of people do, you know?
yeah,
And it's like in the end of the day, what you're good at, what you're passionate at, what you can create, I think that's still more important than a career at a certain company
yeah.
because that's fleeting.
I heard something years ago that is stuck with me as like one of the greatest fallacies of men in the workplace. And the trope kind of went like this. In the course of a conversation, this white male had said, yeah, you spend a lot of your career working for less money than you're worth, but
Hmm.
it's really fun when you get to that point where you get paid more than you're worth.
Hmm.
And the beef that I had with that was my worth is not defined by my salary.
Mm.
Those are two totally separate entities and don't conflate the two.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was just like, I just remember being absolutely astonished that this was completely how this person thought in a very high corporate position was like, my value, my personal value is this like this number. And I was like, no, 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 no. My value, my worth are not tied to my salary.
Well, and that's the normal thinking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's normal thinking, right? Like we hear it all the time, charge what you're worth, blah, blah. And I get that we're really talking about the work, right? The value of the work you bring, the value of the results, but we conflate the two. Like
Yep.
you are not that. You are more than your skills. You are more than what you can do through labor. So I think language is important, like you pointed out. It's not
Yeah.
about charging what you're worth. It's about charging for the value of the work, for the
Absolutely.
value of your, input or output. So, um, yeah, well, so I already gave my suggestion for people to kind of really think deep about what they want. What's your takeaway for people? How can they get on the path of more autonomy, career autonomy and independence in the world that we live in today?
I'm going to say you take the philosophical edge. I'm going to take the tactical edge today,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is think about trade-offs. I'd say
Mm,
write them down. What are the trade-offs? What are you willing to trade your time for? Is that dollars? And then what time do you have that you're still willing to trade? Is that your workout time, your sleep time, your read time, your family time? Think about all those things. Write them down. Think about what those trade-offs might be. What are you going to give up with the time you want to give
hmm
and you're going to want to get paid for? And then think really hard about what are the things that are important to you because that will guide your decision making.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome.
As always, a pleasure to chat with you, my friend.
Yes, absolutely.